At my sister's rehearsal dinner, she was handed the microphone and joked, "We all know who pays for everything," while everyone laughed at me. So I waited until the dinner ended, walked up to the venue manager, showed him the receipts for the deposit I made, and 10 minutes before the first dance, the caterer announced the event was on hold because the deposit had been reversed. I, 32M, had been looking forward to my sister's wedding for months, not because I particularly cared about the ceremony itself, but because I genuinely wanted to see her happy. She'd been planning this thing for over a year, and somewhere along the way, I'd gotten roped into helping pay for it. Not that anyone asked politely. It was more like an expectation that settled over our family like fog, thick, suffocating, and impossible to see through. The problem started about 8 months before the wedding when my sister sat me down at our parents' house and explained that her fiancé's family couldn't contribute much. Their business had taken a hit, and money was tight. She looked at me with those pleading eyes that had worked on me since we were kids, and before I knew it, I was agreeing to cover the venue deposit. $5,000. She promised she'd pay me back once they got wedding gifts and tax returns and a dozen other vague future windfalls that I knew would never materialize. I made the deposit in my name because the venue required a credit card, and hers was maxed out. The manager, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, took my information and assured me everything was set. My sister hugged me, thanked me profusely, and promised this was just temporary. I wanted to believe her. Over the next few months, I watched as the wedding plans spiraled into something increasingly extravagant. The modest affair she'd initially described transformed into a 200-person spectacle with ice sculptures, a live band, and a menu that included lobster tail. Every time I suggested maybe scaling back, she'd get defensive and remind me that this was her special day, something she'd dreamed about since childhood. Our mother would chime in, saying I should be supportive, that family helps family. Our father stayed silent, as he always did during these conflicts. The rehearsal dinner arrived on a Friday evening in late October. The venue was a renovated barn with exposed beams and string lights that gave everything a warm, rustic glow. I showed up alone, having broken up with my girlfriend 2 months earlier over unrelated issues, and immediately felt the weight of being the single older brother surrounded by happy couples. My sister's friends shot me sympathetic looks that I pretended not to notice. Dinner was served family style, with platters of chicken and pasta circulating the tables. I sat with some cousins I barely knew, making small talk about jobs and weather and all the meaningless things people discuss when they have nothing real to say to each other. My sister floated around the room in a white dress, laughing and hugging people, playing the role of bride-to-be with practiced perfection. Then came the speeches. Her maid of honor went first, telling embarrassing stories from college that got polite laughs. The best man followed with jokes about the groom that were slightly too crude for the older relatives. I clapped along with everyone else, nursing my second beer and wondering when I could reasonably leave. My sister took the microphone next. She thanked everyone for coming, got emotional talking about her relationship, and then her tone shifted into something that made my stomach tighten. She started joking about the wedding planning process, about how stressful it had been coordinating everything, and then she said it. "We all know who really pays for everything around here." She gestured vaguely in my direction, and the room erupted in laughter. People turned to look at me, grinning like this was the funniest thing they'd heard all night. My face burned. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, and raised my beer in a mock toast. But inside, something cracked. My mother was laughing. My father had that uncomfortable look he gets when he knows something's wrong, but won't intervene. My sister's fiancé was laughing too, slapping the table like this was comedy gold. Even the cousins next to me were chuckling, though they seemed more nervous than genuine. I sat there for the rest of dinner with my jaw clenched, barely tasting the food. Nobody came over to check on me. Nobody apologized. It was like that moment had been forgotten by everyone except me. My sister continued her speech, thanking her future in-laws and her bridesmaids, and then everyone moved on to dessert like nothing had happened. I excused myself and walked outside, needing air. The parking lot was lit by a single street lamp, and I stood there in the cool autumn night, hands in my pockets, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to just get in my car and drive away from all of it. But another part, the part that had been swallowing insults and demands for money my entire adult life, wanted something different. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The venue deposit was listed there in my transaction history, clear as day, with my name attached to it. I scrolled to my email and found the confirmation from the venue manager. Everything was documented. Everything was in my name. 20 minutes later, I walked back inside and found the venue manager near the kitchen, overseeing the dessert service. I approached her calmly and asked if we could speak privately. She led me to a small office near the entrance, and I explained the situation. I told her I needed to reverse the deposit, that there had been a misunderstanding about who was responsible for payment. She looked confused at first, asking why I'd want to do that so close to the wedding. I kept my voice steady and said it was a personal matter, that I was within my rights as the person who'd made the payment, and that I needed it processed immediately. She hesitated, glancing at her computer screen, then back at me. I showed her my ID, my credit card, the email confirmation. Everything matched. She asked if I was sure, and I told her I'd never been more certain of anything. The reversal took about 15 minutes to process. She explained that this would put the event in jeopardy, that without a deposit they couldn't guarantee services. I nodded, thanked her for her help, and walked back to the main hall. Dessert was being served. My sister was taking selfies with her bridesmaids. The groom was talking to his groomsmen near the bar. Everything was perfect. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. I drove home, poured myself a whiskey, and waited. My phone stayed silent for about an hour. Then the call started. Update 1. The first call came from my mother at nearly midnight. She was hysterical, asking what I'd done, saying the venue manager had contacted my sister about a payment issue. I let it go to voicemail. Then my sister called, screaming so loud I could hear her voice through the phone even though I hadn't answered. More voicemails piled up. My father sent a text message asking me to call him immediately. I turned my phone off and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. Saturday morning, I turned my phone back on to find 47 missed calls and countless text messages. The wedding was supposed to start at 4 that afternoon. I made coffee and read through the messages slowly, watching the panic escalate in real time. My mother begged me to fix this. My sister called me every name imaginable. Her fiancé threatened legal action, which was empty since I'd done nothing illegal. Cousins and aunts I barely knew messaged me asking what was happening. Around noon, my father showed up at my apartment. I let him in because he'd never done anything to me directly, and because I was curious what he'd say. He looked tired, older than I'd remembered. He sat on my couch and asked me, very quietly, what I wanted. I told him I wanted respect. I told him I was tired of being the family ATM, tired of the jokes, tired of being treated like my only value was financial. I told him that one comment at dinner had been the culmination of years of this treatment, and I was done. He sat there for a long moment, then said he understood but asked if I realized what this would do to my sister. I asked if she'd realized what her comment would do to me. He had no answer for that. He left after trying one more time to convince me to reverse the reversal, to save the wedding, to be the bigger person. I closed the door behind him and went back to my coffee. The venue, from what I gathered through the family text chain I was somehow still included in, gave my sister until 2 p.m. to provide a new deposit or proof of payment. She didn't have it. Her fiancé's family couldn't pull together that kind of money on 12 hours' notice. My parents offered what they could, but it wasn't enough. The wedding was postponed. Update 2. The fallout was spectacular. My sister posted a vague message on social media about family betrayal and unexpected setbacks. Her friends flooded the comments with support, not knowing the full story. Some of our relatives who'd been at the rehearsal dinner started piecing things together, and the family group chat became a war zone. My mother's sisters split into 2 camps. One side said I was justified, that my sister had been out of line, and that you don't humiliate the person funding your wedding. The other side called me petty and cruel, said I'd ruined my sister's special day over a joke, and that family should forgive. The arguments got nasty enough that 2 of my aunts stopped speaking to each other entirely. My sister eventually rescheduled the wedding for 2 months later at a much smaller venue they could afford themselves. The guest list dropped from 200 to 75. No ice sculptures. No live band. No lobster tail. She sent me an invitation anyway, which I found darkly funny. I didn't RSVP. 3 weeks after the original wedding date, my sister sent me a text message. It wasn't an apology exactly, more an acknowledgement that her comment had hurt me. She said she hadn't meant it maliciously, that she was just joking around, and that she hadn't realized how much resentment I'd been carrying. She said the postponement had actually been good for them, that they'd realized how out of control the planning had gotten, and that the smaller wedding felt more authentic. She didn't ask for forgiveness and didn't ask me to come to the new ceremony. It was just information. I read it several times and didn't respond. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. The relationship with my family had fundamentally changed. My mother still called occasionally, conversations awkward and surface level. My father sent birthday and holiday texts. But the easy assumption that I'd always be there, always help out, always swallow whatever they dished out, that was gone. The actual wedding happened in December. I heard about it through cousins who attended. It was nice, apparently. Intimate. My sister looked beautiful. The groom cried during the vows. Everything you'd expect. They went to Cancun for their honeymoon, somewhere they could afford without anyone's help. I spent that day at a bar with a friend from work who knew the whole story. We watched football and didn't talk about family drama. It was a good day. Update 3. It's been 6 months since everything happened, and I still think about that moment at the rehearsal dinner more often than I'd like to admit. Not with regret exactly, but with a kind of curious detachment, like I'm watching someone else's life play out. My sister had a baby boy in late spring. I received a birth announcement in the mail, a generic card with the baby's name and weight. No personal note. I sent a gift card and a card congratulating them. She texted a thank you. That was the extent of our interaction. My parents asked if I'd come to the baby's baptism. I said I'd think about it, and then didn't go. The boundary I'd established wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about the entire dynamic, the years of taking me for granted, and the realization that changing those patterns required distance. Some of my cousins stayed in touch. The ones who'd watched everything unfold seemed to understand that this wasn't about one comment or one wedding. They'd seen their own versions of family dysfunction and recognized the breaking point when they saw it. We met for dinner occasionally, and they never pressured me to reconcile. The truth is, I don't regret what I did. People keep waiting for me to feel guilty, to realize I went too far, but that moment hasn't come. What I did was extreme, yes, but it was also the only thing that made anyone in my family actually see me as a person with feelings rather than a resource to be exploited. My sister lives her life now without my financial support, and from what I can tell, she's managing just fine. Her husband got a better job. They moved into a small house. They're building their life together, the way couples are supposed to, without using family members as a bank. I've started dating someone new, a woman I met through friends who knows nothing about my family drama and doesn't need to. She's met my parents once, briefly, and that was enough. I keep those worlds separate now. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if there was another way, some magical conversation where I could have explained how I felt, and everyone would have understood and apologized and changed. But I know that's fantasy. Some people only learn when they face real consequences, and sometimes burning a bridge is the only way to stop being walked over. The venue manager, incidentally, sent me a thank you card a few weeks after everything settled. Apparently, my sister's family had been difficult to work with even before the payment issue, and the whole situation had prompted the venue to change their policies about deposits and cancellations. She said I'd done her a favor, in a weird way. I found that amusing. I still live in the same apartment, still work the same job, still go to the same coffee shop on Sunday mornings. My life didn't transform into something radically different after I stood up for myself. But the weight I'd been carrying, the constant expectation that I'd bend over backward for family no matter how they treated me, that's gone. And in the space it left behind, there's something that feels a lot like peace. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.